In 2004, an Air Force pilot reported an object accelerating from 0 to 7,200 miles per hour in just over 2 seconds. The case was quietly shelved, sealed under a chain of internal memos, and officially logged as equipment malfunction. Tonight, former FBI agent and fact or faked investigator Ben Hansen finally goes on record, confirming that the Air Force hid critical data tied to that event, footage that allegedly caused a senior officer to walk out of the review room. If what Ben just revealed is true, this wasn't a malfunction, it was a cover-up. Stay with us, subscribe now, because what you're about to hear has never aired on television. April 4, 2004. A training flight unfolds over restricted airspace near an undisclosed Nevada test range, where 2 F-16 pilots are running high-altitude maneuver drills. Their onboard radar system, calibrated for long-range missile tracking, suddenly flags an unidentified object entering the airspace at approximately 38,000 feet. The system tags it as a potential drone malfunction until it performs a maneuver that no drone, aircraft, or prototype craft on record has ever demonstrated. According to internal maintenance logs, the object moved from a dead stop to over 7,200 miles per hour in just over 2 seconds, without generating any detectable exhaust signature or sonic boom. The radar operator monitoring from ground control reports interference, claiming the display ghosted the visual. Standard procedure dictates a calibration rerun, but before the update triggers, one of the pilots radio transmits a statement later withheld from public transcripts. Confirm visual contact, metallic sphere, no appendages. It's matching course and speed. Seconds later, the object veers sharply upward at a near vertical climb and vanishes beyond radar range. The pilots attempt to pursue, but are ordered to disengage and return to formation without deviation. An emergency review is conducted that same evening. A digital copy of the radar output, along with cockpit camera footage, is classified under a temporary designation, BDN 4212 anomaly. The official report lists an atmospheric distortion inconsistency, and the anomaly is marked as sensor ghost data. But internal communications, later revealed to Ben Hansen, contradict that assessment. In the words of a flight systems analyst, written 42 minutes after the footage review, if this was a sensor glitch, someone needs to explain why the pilots described what the computer registered. And yet, within 72 minutes, the full recording was locked under higher clearance, and the incident quietly buried. What no one expected was that one individual kept a copy, and years later, it would land in the hands of a former FBI agent who could tell when someone was hiding something. To understand why Ben Hansen's confirmation carries serious weight, you have to understand who he is outside of television. Before becoming known on Fact or Fake Paranormal Files, Hansen spent years as a federal investigator with the FBI, trained in forensic interviewing, deception detection, and threat assessment. He wasn't just someone reviewing footage for entertainment. He worked on interstate criminal cases, intelligence briefings, and psychological profiling. His specialty was reading micro-expressions, body language, and speech patterns that indicate when someone is withholding truth. Colleagues described him as a human polygraph with field clearance. When he transitioned into television, most viewers thought he was just another paranormal host. What they didn't realize was that Hansen had no interest in promoting sensationalism. On Fact or Fake, he routinely debunked cases, openly calling out staged evidence. His credibility in skeptical investigation is precisely why this 2004 case unsettled him. In interviews, he often stated, "I don't chase belief, I chase consistency." In 2019, Hansen was quietly approached by a former aerospace contractor with ties to defense intelligence. According to his statement, he was asked to review irregular aerial observation data for behavioral analysis, not engineering. That's when he was granted limited view access to archived audio documentation from the 2004 Nevada incident. He immediately recognized stress-driven vocal patterns in the pilot's voice during the final transmission, patterns consistent with fear, not procedural reporting. His internal notes indicate he replayed the phrase, "It's matching course and speed," more than 14 times. What disturbed him was not just what the pilots described, but the fact that all three involved officers avoided mentioning the event publicly for over a decade. despite multiple opportunities. Hansen said men trained to give testimony under pressure paused before answering questions about that day. That's not hesitation, that's suppression. The incident wasn't declared secret because it couldn't be explained. According to Hansen, it was suppressed because someone decided it couldn't be discussed. For nearly 17 years, not a single member of the 2004 flight team publicly acknowledged the event. That silence fractured in late 2021, when retired Air Force Lieutenant Colonel Daniel Warren contacted Ben Hansen after watching an episode of UFO Witness. Warren hadn't appeared in any official investigations nor spoken in military forums since the incident. Hansen later explained that Warren didn't reach out seeking fame or clarity. He reached out because the footage from Hansen's episode triggered the same physical reaction he'd experienced in the cockpit that day. In Hansen's field notes, Warren's first words to him are recorded as, "It didn't just vanish, it saw us." During their interview, Warren described the object as a polished metallic sphere, maybe 15 feet across, hovering like it didn't care about gravity. He claimed it tracked their formation for roughly 3 seconds before abruptly disappearing, not upward or sideways, but beyond visual comprehension. According to Warren, "I didn't see it leave. One frame it was there, the next frame it wasn't, like it blinked out of existence." Hansen, using his interrogation expertise, deliberately asked Warren to recount the moment from different perspectives. Each time, Warren trembled at the exact same phrase. "It moved when we moved." Physiological stress indicators, tremor, vocal strain, eye fixation, were consistent with trauma-based recall, not fabrication. When Hansen asked why he broke silence nearly 2 decades later, Warren reportedly looked down and said, "I thought with time it would feel less real." It didn't. The interview ended abruptly when Warren paused mid-sentence and requested to stop recording before describing a sound he claimed to hear seconds after the object vanished. He refused to elaborate further, but submitted a written statement that concluded, "Some things in the air don't obey the same rules we do." Following the interview, Warren declined additional contact and withdrew from public attention. On record, Hansen states, he didn't want answers. He wanted to make sure someone finally asked the right question. According to internal debrief notes later reviewed by Ben Hansen, the original recording from the Nevada test range lasted 42 seconds from initial radar lock to object disappearance. However, the version preserved in official archives is only 28 seconds long. The missing 14 seconds reportedly contain the most significant part of the encounter, the moment when the unidentified object halts mid-air, rotates slightly as if orienting toward the aircraft, and then accelerates at an angle inconsistent with known aerodynamics. Hansen explains that in the missing segment, the object performed a movement described as zero inertia displacement. Instead of gradual acceleration or directional buildup, it shifted in a single motion, almost like repositioning in space, rather than traveling through it. An engineering analyst present during the initial review allegedly wrote, "This doesn't move through air, it moves through distance." Those notations were redacted from the archived draft, but fragments were preserved in Hansen's handwritten transcription from a confidential source he interviewed off-record. One portion he retained documented that a technician attempted 2 separate recalibrations during playback to determine whether the image was residual ghosting. Both attempts failed to reproduce the anomaly. At that point, according to Hansen's source, a senior aerospace liaison halted the session and issued a direct verbal order to cease further analysis, stating, "Classify under BDN 4212 and remove this portion from distribution." Hansen claims that order went beyond standard data protection. It was an active suppression directive. The digital extraction of the footage was completed, and the stripped version delivered to the official log within hours. Yet one of the personnel on the review team, unnamed but described by Hansen as morally conflicted, retained a private copy before deletion. That unauthorized copy would eventually surface in fragments almost 15 years later, contacted through a third-party investigator and handed to Hansen during his confidential involvement with a private aerospace research group. When Hansen first viewed it, his immediate response was written in his field log. This segment validates the pilot's fear response. If this wasn't biological intelligence, it was behavioral mimicry. Official records make no reference to the missing section. The last documented annotation under the case, footage integrity compromised, deemed irrelevant. Hansen's assessment states otherwise. In his words, they didn't delete the clip because it was corrupted. They removed it because it was precise. During the original review session in 2004, there was one person in the room who wasn't a pilot or an analyst, Master Sergeant Elliot Green, base security liaison responsible for evidence chain control. He wasn't there to interpret what happened. His job was simple: oversee handling, storage, and eventual classification of sensitive materials. According to documentation later recounted by Ben Hansen, Green remained silent during most of the playback. What stood out wasn't his silence, it was his reaction afterward. Hansen describes Green as the kind of career military man who followed orders without question. Yet after watching the full recording, including the now-removed 14-second segment, Green reportedly stayed in the room alone for nearly 2 minutes after everyone else was dismissed. A maintenance officer later told Hansen that Green remained frozen, facing the blackened monitor with his hands clasped behind his back, as if standing at attention before something that wasn't there anymore. In a rarely seen statement provided anonymously years later to Hansen during a private inquiry, Green allegedly wrote, "We were told not to speak about what we saw. The drives were removed. The backup tape was physically cut. I've stored evidence of crimes, accidents, failures. This was none of those. The thing didn't just disappear. I don't think it left. I think it shifted." Immediately following the incident, Green requested reassignment citing persistent sleep disturbance and emotional distress. He was transferred to administrative duty and retired early the following year. No psychological case documentation is publicly available, but internal notes refer to occupational stress following exposure to classified anomalous training review. Hansen analyzed Green's statement using his forensic interview methodology. He found no indicators of fabrication. What stood out instead was omission. Green repeatedly avoided answering one key question: what sound he heard after the object vanished. Hansen later wrote in his briefing log, he exhibited controlled breathing, typical of veterans under exposure trauma. He was trained to suppress panic, yet his eye dilation indicated residual fear while recalling the event. The statement ends with 8 words, circled twice in Hansen's notes. They want us to treat it like a glitch. Green never spoke publicly again. Hansen concludes, he wasn't protecting classified technology. He was protecting classified fear. When Ben Hansen finally gained limited access to the archived material tied to the 2004 encounter, he wasn't given the video first. He was handed a heavily redacted internal Air Force evaluation titled Anomalous Reaction Speed. Subject requires further classification. It was dated June 12, 2004, a little over 2 months after the initial event. Hansen recalls that the document wasn't labeled under typical flight incident review categories. It was categorized under Experimental Aerospace Unresolved, a designation used for rare cases that intersect classified technology and unidentified variables. The part that struck Hansen most wasn't the redactions, it was what wasn't redacted. On page 3, just above a section that was blacked out entirely, a single unedited line remained. Estimated reaction speed exceeds kinetic limits of any known propulsion. The report states that during the object's final movement, electromagnetic interference was recorded at 0.4 seconds prior to disappearance. It referenced a frequency spike that momentarily disrupted internal sensors, followed by visual signal compression, a term Hansen later clarified refers to image displacement consistent with something moving faster than the system could process. Essentially, the object outpaced the camera's capacity to register continuity. Page 4 detailed an analysis from an unnamed engineering consultant. No biological occupant could withstand the G-force of observed motion. Consider non-organic or remote control. That entire paragraph was redacted in subsequent versions, but preserved in the copy Hansen transcribed. The final page of the report had 3 lines removed entirely, not just blacked out, but physically cut from the document, leaving a visible tear across 2 paragraphs. Hansen's note in his investigative log reads, "They didn't redact these pages. They extracted them." A discrepancy remained in the header, referencing 3 review attendees, but only 2 signatures were present. When Hansen later questioned why the case was never listed in official UAP tracking systems, he was told this incident was logged under aerospace confidentiality, not unidentified aerial activity. He responded with a statement now circulating in investigator forums. If they filed it under technology review, that means someone believed it wasn't unknown. They believed it was intentional. According to Hansen's investigation notes, the 2004 incident was quietly forwarded to a small analysis group composed of aerospace engineers and defense contractors operating under an internal development program. Their objective wasn't to verify what the pilots saw. It was to assess whether the anomaly could be reverse engineered or categorized as a systemic threat. Hansen states the team never concluded it was a glitch. In fact, their off-record remarks suggest they believed the object responded intelligently to the aircraft. One analyst, identified only as W. Turner, reportedly led the review using physics-based motion modeling. Turner observed that the object executed 3 micro-adjustments while tailing the F-16s, precisely matching their formation shifts. His handwritten note, retrieved from a draft version of the report before redaction, read, "If autonomous, it's predictive. If manned, it's beyond human tolerance." In one off-camera discussion recorded in Hansen's debrief document, a propulsion consultant remarked, "No known aircraft achieves those maneuvers without subjecting occupants to catastrophic internal trauma." Another replied, "Unless it's not moving through air the way we do, it may not be obeying inertia at all." Hansen transcribed part of a whiteboard diagram where a team member scrawled, "Physics didn't fail. Our understanding did." Below it, someone had boxed a phrase, "Zero drag environment." The drawing was reportedly erased moments later when a senior facilitator arrived unexpectedly. An internal remark, later confirmed by Hansen through cross-interview, claimed the object's movement pattern matched a classified electromagnetic signature analysis conducted in 2013 during an unrelated intelligence study. That correlation was never published or submitted through official channels. Shortly after these informal conclusions were made, the team lead reportedly recommended the case be reclassified under developmental aerospace threats rather than unidentified aerial phenomena. The phrasing in Hansen's notes summarizes the shift. This is not an observational anomaly. This is an evasive capability. The session was terminated early, without final written conclusions. Hansen believes the case was closed, not because it was resolved, but because someone higher up decided it was not to be pursued further. His final remark on this part of the investigation reads, "They didn't avoid explaining it. They avoided acknowledging it required one." The story remained buried for almost 2 decades, until Hansen finally addressed it publicly during a closed-door recording session for a documentary interview in late 2024. Initially, the conversation was focused on standard cases of pilot testimony and unexplained aerial tracking data. What made this moment different was that the interviewer mentioned a classified anomaly from an unnamed training exercise in 2004, not realizing Hansen had directly reviewed that exact case. The producer later said Hansen paused long enough for the camera operator to check if audio had cut out. Then he leaned forward and quietly said, "I know which one you're talking about." And yes, the Air Force never told the full story. Production reports indicate the temperature in the room dropped, whether from climate control or tension is unclear, but Hansen's expression shifted from informative to uncomfortable. When asked why the official account described the technology malfunction, he replied, "I can't officially say the Air Force lied, but I can say the truth was deliberately not recorded." That single sentence reportedly caused the producer to halt the session and request legal clearance before continuing. Moments after, with cameras rolling again, Hansen added there was a behavior pattern in how they handled the deletion. It wasn't done to protect classified aviation technology. It was done because someone believed what that thing reacted to wasn't supposed to be provoked. The recording reveals Hansen's tone tightening on the word reacted, suggesting he saw more than just the footage. When the interviewer pressed him directly, "Do you think it demonstrated intelligence?" Hansen didn't speak for 6 seconds. His response, "It reacted to us." According to the crew log, one team member visibly signaled to cut filming, but Hansen waved them on. He concluded with what is now considered his most provocative statement to date. If what happened that day becomes fully acknowledged, it changes how every military engagement is evaluated, because that wasn't an observation event. That was a response interaction. Within 24 hours of that interview, legal advisories were issued to ensure segment review before airing. The raw footage has not been publicly broadcast. What followed would cement why this admission matters, because the final part of Hansen's comment suggests the 2004 encounter was not isolated. It followed a pattern already seen, and one expected to repeat. Hansen ended his remarks with a conclusion that left the room silent. We shouldn't be asking if it was real. We should be asking why no one is allowed to acknowledge it happened. According to sources close to the production, he believes documentation tied to the 2004 case is being re-examined by select members of a Senate Intelligence Subcommittee, with reports expected to surface privately by late 2025. He emphasized that what occurred wasn't a malfunction or coincidence. It was deliberate interaction. It didn't flee, he stated. It disengaged. In his analysis, that suggests awareness, intent, possibly even observation. Hansen closed with a chilling final sentence. If they're not worried about being seen, it's because they've already evaluated us. Subscribe for Part 2. What Hansen says happened in 2016 makes this look minor.